From the moment they sold my entire workshop to cover my brother's debts, I knew nothing would be the same. Betrayed by the people who should have supported me, I rebuilt my dreams from scratch, turning loss into unstoppable success. This is my story of grit, betrayal, and rising from the ashes. I want to share my story with you. I remember the first time I stepped foot into that cavernous space in my parents' old garage. The razzmatazz of tools shimmering under the fluorescent bulbs like jewels in a treasure chest. Every weekend for 2 years, I dragged home every spare dime I could muster, overtime from my pizza delivery shifts, freelance design gigs, even cash from recycling bottles, and poured it all into that garage until it was unrecognizable. What was once a dust-choked storage closet for lawnmowers and holiday decorations became my custom-built workshop. Walls lined with pegboards holding every wrench, chisel, and soldering iron I'd meticulously sourced online, a gleaming workbench rescued from a defunct carpentry co-op, and a state-of-the-art computer too powerful for most gaming rigs but perfect for 3D modeling and rendering. I wired up the lighting myself, even installed a small sound system so I could drown out the world with Beethoven or Brian Eno while I worked. It was my sanctuary, my laboratory, the physical testament to every sleepless night and skipped dinner with friends. When I looked around, I could taste the future. Prototypes for ergonomic furniture I design, custom components for indie video game developers, maybe even a boutique startup that would put my family name back on the map. I'd spend hours sketching floor plans for clients in 3D software, then switch over to my lathe or milling machine to turn those glowing pixels into tangible parts. I watched my bank balance jump in tiny increments, sometimes $10, sometimes 50, knowing each penny nudged me closer to the freedom I craved. To me, that workshop wasn't some hobby. It was the crucible where my identity was forged. I could already see the annual design awards, the feature articles in niche magazines, the friendships and collaborations that would spring from that precise, humming machine at my fingertips. My little brother, by contrast, lounged on the living room couch, phone in hand, dreaming up overnight business schemes nobody asked for: a dropshipping store for novelty socks, a failed attempt to flip concert tickets, a cryptocurrency gamble that never went anywhere. My parents cheered him on like proud ringmasters, indulging every harebrained whim with the kind of blind optimism they denied me. At family dinners, I'd cautiously bring up my workshop, my plans, my aspirations. I described the future clients I was courting, the prototypes I was perfecting, and I saw their eyes glaze over like I was reciting the specs of a toaster. "It's just a side thing," my dad would scoff between bites of overcooked meatloaf, waving away my enthusiasm. "You're just screwing around in that old garage." My mom would chime in with a forced smile. "Maybe you should focus on something more stable, honey. Your brother needs our support right now." My brother would smirk from across the table, tossing his hair back like he hadn't played a single grueling CAD session or wrestled with self-taught soldering in his life. Their obsession wasn't born of love, it was a calculation. Which son could deliver the fastest, flashiest return, even if it was built on a house of cards? Night after night, I returned to that workshop alone, the silence speaking louder than their dismissals. My hands moved on autopilot, shaping steel or coaxing electrons through circuit boards, while the echo of my parents' condescension reverberated in my skull. They didn't see the value in years of meticulous research on thermodynamics or the countless hours I spent debugging code until sunrise. They didn't grasp that the workshop, those humming machines and racks of hardware, was not a mere toy but the keystone of my dreams. I'd sketch new products on the whiteboard they left chained to the wall, jotting prices and target markets, imagining how those ideas would carve out my name in a crowded industry. In my mind, I rehearsed the moment I'd stand on stage at a tech expo, unveiling my first commercial design, watching critics and influencers nod in approval. I pictured the rush of orders flooding in, the business bank account tipping from red into black, the proud smile on my mother's face when she finally understood that this was more than a passing phase. While my family exchanged texts planning the next rescue mission for my brother's ill-fated ventures, I was building something real, one carefully calibrated prototype at a time. That workshop wasn't just wood and wires. It was blood, sweat, and unshakable conviction that my future would emerge from that humble garage, undeterred by their apathy or my brother's latest folly. I was ready to show them exactly how wrong they were. I first sensed something was wrong when I drove up our gravel driveway and noticed the garage door swung open in a way it never had before. No gentle hum of the electric opener, just a heavy slab of metal propped aside as if someone forced it. My heart thumped in my chest like a warning drum. I parked, cut the engine, and paused at the lip of the threshold. The scent of sawdust and machine oil, which used to greet me like an old friend, was gone. In its place hung a faint, hollow echo that reminded me of a house cleared out for sale. I tightened my grip on the car door handle and stepped into the emptiness. My eyes darted across the barren concrete floor. The workbench was gone. The pegboard, once crammed with tools I'd spent months hunting for in second-hand markets, had been stripped down to bare hooks. The custom computer tower, that beast of circuitry I'd soldered late into countless nights, had vanished, including the high-resolution monitor I planned to use for my portfolio presentations. Even the sound system speakers I wired into the rafters were unceremoniously ripped down, their cables dangling like severed veins. I walked further in, each step a betrayal of hope. The lathe, the milling machine, the precision drill press, all the machines that had hummed with possibility were nowhere to be found. In their place were empty brackets, upside-down shelves, and splintered wood where my beloved workbench once stood. My lungs protested, and I fought back a wave of nausea. It felt like the world had crumbled beneath me. A creak behind me made me spin around. My mother stood in the doorway, her face carefully blank, arms crossed as if she'd been waiting for this moment. My father lingered behind her, eyes averted, fingernails digging into his palms. I opened my mouth, trying to choke back the first guttural sound of rage that threatened to escape. What the hell happened here? My dad cleared his throat. We had to make a difficult decision, son. His voice was soft, like he was delivering a eulogy. My mom nodded and added, it was a necessary sacrifice. I felt my knees buckle. Necessary sacrifice for what? And then it hit me, the text messages I'd glanced at earlier that morning, the ones from my brother about some new investment opportunity gone south. It all made horrifying sense. They de-sold my dream, every cent of value, so they could bail him out again. Sold, I managed, my voice cracking. I sank to the floor, looking at the dust motes dancing in the slanted sunlight. You sold my workshop, my computer, everything. My mother inhaled deeply as if bracing for my next blow. Your brother's project, he needed funds to pay off a supplier. He's in a tight spot and you know how imaginative he gets. Her lips twitched in a half-smile. It was just a hobby, really. You haven't been using that space in months. I laughed then, a raw, desperate sound that echoed off the bare walls. You think I haven't been using it? You think I treat this like a toy? I stood, voice trembling but louder now. Every prototype I ever made, every late-night design session, I poured my life into this place. You took it without asking, sold it off to foot his bill for another stupid gamble. My brother's name was everywhere on the seller's invoice, on the wire transfers, but I refused to utter it. Instead, I grabbed one of the empty hooks on the pegboard and slammed my fist against it. The hollow metal rang in my ears like taunting bells. My father shuffled forward, face red. It wasn't personal. We saw a quick way to solve the problem. You'll find your way, don't worry. Not personal, I repeated, my voice a razor's edge. Is that how you see me? As some expendable backup plan whenever he screws up? You destroyed the foundation of everything I've worked for because his mistake was easier to fix than your pride. My mom's jaw clenched. We did what we had to do for the family. For the family, I spat, turning away so they wouldn't see the tears collecting in my eyes. I gave you every chance to see what this place meant to me. You stole it anyway. They stayed silent, their faces pale masks of guilt and defensiveness. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but my anger was eclipsed by a deeper ache, like some vital piece of me had been ripped out, leaving a bleeding cavity. I stumbled back, searching for anything that remained of my identity, but the floor was bare. The walls were empty. The future I'd sketched in vibrant detail was erased in a single stroke. I clenched my fists until the knuckles went white, then turned my back on them. I walked out into the sunlight, head bowed, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind me, I could hear my parents whispering apologies I refused to receive. My brother's crisis might have been resolved, but the deadline he'd missed, the contracts he defaulted on, those consequences would circle back soon enough. And when they did, my family would find they'd burned the only bridge that ever led them safe passage. I vowed then, in that moment of absolute devastation, that I would rebuild, not just this workshop, but something far greater than they ever imagined. They'd see what happens when you turn a man into a cornered phoenix. They caught up with me at the curb, voices raised across the manicured lawn as if I'd stolen something from them rather than the other way around. My mother's face was firm, eyes cold and calculating. My father hovered like a beaten dog, ducking under his wife's steely gaze. I'd barely had time to catch my breath from the wreckage in the garage when they started with their rehearsed speeches. You need to see it from our perspective, my mother said, arms crossed like a general marshalling her troops. Your brother's problem was urgent. A supplier was threatening legal action. If we didn't provide funds today, it would have canceled his entire operation. Her lips quivered with faux emotion as she delivered the lines they'd practiced. Your brother's operation, I repeated, the words scraping against my bones. He gambled with someone else's money, ignored deadlines, and you bail him out by destroying my life's work. My voice was brittle. I sounded like a foreigner speaking through a translator, my own anger felt alien. That makes perfect sense in your twisted logic. My father finally spoke, voice small and wavering. Sweetheart, you're so passionate about that workshop, but sometimes you lose sight of what matters. Family comes first, your brother needed help and you have your whole career ahead of you. He tried to reach for my arm, I recoiled as if he'd plunged a hot iron into my skin. It's not personal, you'll rebuild, you're talented, this was just collateral damage. Collateral damage, that phrase hit me like an icy wave. My heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat. Every drop of sweat on my skin felt like the cost of their crime. Collateral damage, I echoed, voice stripped of strength. My designs, my nights without sleep, my bank account that clawed its way back from zero, just damage they could afford to sacrifice. They stood there as though waiting for me to yield to say, okay, I understand, I forgive you. But I felt nothing but contempt. You didn't just help him, I said, eyes burning into theirs. You stomped on the one place where I built my future, that workshop was my identity, you erased me. My mother tilted her head, brow arching. Honey, it was just a garage filled with junk. You had all those fancy machines, but they were idle, collecting dust. She glanced past me at the empty driveway. Isn't it true you haven't sent out a single prototype in months? We gave you a break, we gave you time, but your brother's issues couldn't wait. I pictured every night I'd spent there, lathes spinning, soldering irons glowing red, the hum of the computer rendering designs at 3 a.m. I'd poured everything into that space. How dare they call it idle? I haven't launched anything yet because I was perfecting my designs, I snapped. I was securing contracts. You never asked because you thought it was just a phase. My father stepped forward, shoulders slumped. Son, we believed in you once, but you kept disappearing into that garage. You forgot to pay rent, your phone was always off, you missed important family events. His voice cracked as he listed every cut corner he'd secretly chalked up against me. Your brother may be reckless, but he's social. He pulls people in with his charm. You isolated yourself and then cried foul when we needed a solution. Isolation, I spat. You call focus isolation. You call hard work a refusal to attend your dinner parties. You measure value by dinner table smiles. You never bothered to learn what I was doing in that garage because you already decided it was worthless. My voice was rising now, but the final straw had already snapped inside me. A cold clarity settled in my chest, sharper than anger. You needed a scapegoat for his screw-up, a sacrifice you could swallow without blinking, and you picked me. They both opened their mouths, but no apology came. Instead, my mother held up one manicured hand. We did what we had to do, you'll get over it, it's business, pure and simple. Her tone was flat, like she was stating a weather report. My father nodded mutely beside her, eyes downcast but proud they'd stuck to their decision. I felt more betrayed than I ever had in my life. Every lie they'd told themselves to justify this atrocity lay bare in their faces. I realized in that moment that there was no family safety net waiting for me, only cold calculus and a willingness to destroy the one person brave enough to build something. I swallowed hard-tasting bile. Fine, I said, voice eerily calm. If you think this is just business, then let's treat it like one. Consider this the end of our arrangement. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving their shocked silence behind. The final straw had snapped, but in that break lay the promise of something far greater than what they'd crushed. I carried that silent vow with me, and I knew the next time they heard my name, it would be as the man who rose from ashes they themselves had set ablaze. I walked away from their house without a backward glance, every step a hammer blow severing the last thread of loyalty I'd clung to. The sun was dipping low, shadows stretching across the driveway like long fingers trying to drag me back. But I pushed on, my breaths coming fast and shallow, the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. I didn't look at the empty garage, didn't listen to the half-formed apologies my parents yelled after me. Those words were poison now, empty justifications that had burned my dreams to ash. I found myself in the parking lot of a rundown apartment complex by nightfall. The neon vacancy sign flickered erratically as if warning me away, but I had nowhere else to go. With a single suitcase and a head full of thunderous thoughts, I checked in. The room was small, barely big enough for the twin bed and a folding chair. The wallpaper peeled in corners, and a thin curtain did little against the relentless buzz of traffic outside. There was no workshop here, no gleaming computer, no machines humming in sympathetic harmony with my ambitions. Just a chipped desk, a cheap lamp, and a cracked window overlooking a street lamp that flickered every few seconds like a malfunctioning metronome. For the first night, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling until dawn, listening to every creak and squeak in the walls. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced through memories of the workshop's dust and metal, the way every tool felt like an extension of my hands. The sense of loss was a physical ache that pounded in my temples. By morning, I felt stripped of everything familiar, marooned in a place that smelled of stale cigarettes and burnt coffee. But the emptiness also cleared my head. The betrayal, the justification, the final straw, all of it crystallized into something fierce and unyielding inside me. I realized that I didn't need their permission, their garage, or their blind faith. I needed only my skills, my grit, and an idea that could reshape everything. The old plan, mirroring what I'd lost, felt small now. I wanted something larger, something that would leave no doubt of my value and make my family's cowardice look like the rusted scrap it truly was. By the second day, I'd scoured the local thrift shops for second-hand furniture and tools I could jury-rig into a makeshift workspace. I borrowed free Wi-Fi in the lobby to download basic CAD software and tutorials. I set up the cracked desk in my motel room, stacked old crates as makeshift shelving, and plugged in the lone extension cord running out the window. My new workshop was a far cry from the conditioning of my old space, but desperation has its own sleek efficiency. I arranged the crates so they were within arm's reach of the desk. I draped a blanket over a folding card table to deaden the traffic noise. Each small victory, reattaching a broken lamp, reformatting my laptop, growing accustomed to the scent of mildew, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. It was in that cramped, fluorescent-lit room that my new plan took shape. I began sketching on scrap paper, modular foldable workstations designed for makers on the go, portable fabrication kits that could assemble into fully functional mini workshops anywhere. Urban nomads, remote designers, impromptu repairers. There was an entire untapped market in people like me, displaced creatives who needed flexibility. The idea was audacious. A compact system that integrated 3D printing, CNC milling, and basic electronic stations into one collapsible frame no larger than a carry-on bag. I saw potential partnerships with carking spaces, pop-up tech events, and even disaster relief teams that needed mobile fabrication. The possibilities sent electricity through my veins. I spent nights sketching detailed blueprints under the flickering light, mapping out every hinge, every quick-release clamp, every foldable joint. I broke down the bill of materials into accessible, low-cost components, then drilled into cost-per-unit calculations. I imagined selling digital kits so users could source local parts, cutting shipping costs and carbon footprints. I reached out to a couple of online maker communities under a pseudonym, dropping hints about my concept to gauge interest. The responses were electric. People craved a way to take their workshops with them, to design and build anywhere the world happened to be. My anger at my family fueled every step. When I felt doubt, I pictured my old garage empty and violated and transformed that pain into determination. When I ran through budget constraints, I imagined my brother's smirk and channeled it into ruthless efficiency. Find the cheapest suppliers, streamline the design, reduce assembly time. Every setback, every wrong part delivered, every prototype flaw only sharpened my resolve. The makeshift lab in that shabby room became a war camp, and I was the lone soldier plotting a breakthrough that would eclipse anything they'd ever understood. By the end of the first week, I had a rudimentary proof of concept, a frame made of aluminum tubing lashed together with quick-release clips and a repurposed 3D printer. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I printed a simple hinge, tested its strength, and watched as the whole structure folded down to backpack size. My heart raced when it clicked into place. In that moment, I knew I was on the cusp of something far greater than a garage full of machines. I was forging a future they could never take away, a future built on my skills, my vision, and an unbreakable will. Every morning before sunrise, I crept out of the motel room in jeans and a hoodie, like some ghost slipping through deserted hallways. I bought a beat-up Honda Civic with cash I'd squirreled away in odd envelopes hidden under floorboards at my parents' house. They thought I was too defeated to even look for a car. But I needed mobility to visit surplus warehouses, makerspaces, and hardware markets across town without drawing attention. While they scrolled through pity-laden social media posts asking if I was okay, I was mapping out my supply chain, sourcing raw aluminum tubing from a defunct roller hockey rink's liquidation sale, and snagging heavy-duty clamps from an auction of a shuttered auto shop. Each purchase was under an alias, each transaction a cipher they could never trace back to me. I set up an unassuming PO box in a nearby strip mall under the name Moduform Labs and used it as the shipping address for parts and equipment. I split orders across multiple suppliers, avoiding any single company from connecting the dots. When I needed electronic boards and stepper motors, I ordered them from Chinese wholesalers, specifying dropshipping directly to my PO box. The parts arrived in brown bags and nondescript boxes, and I'd ferry them back to my makeshift workshop in the motel room. To anyone who looked, it was just another giggling garage band of eclectic knickknacks. But inside, I was building the skeleton of my foldable fabrication system, each rod, each joint, each hinge slot meticulously measured and remeasured. I stumbled upon a little-known forum for field engineers working in remote mining operations. These professionals needed portable repair stations for rig failures in the middle of nowhere. That was my golden ticket. I signed up with a throwaway email, masquerading as a disgruntled mining consultant, and peppered the forum with questions about their pain points. How heavy could a tool chest be before it became a backbreaker? Which power sources were most reliable in sub-zero temperatures? What dimensions fit inside cramped helicopter holds? The replies came flooding in, raw, unfiltered complaints and detailed wish lists. I soaked it all up, then used the data to refine my designs. My phantom persona even posted a few prototype renders to gauge reactions. The feedback was unanimous. This was exactly what they needed. As parts accumulated, I commandeered late-night hours at a community makerspace, trading membership credits for midnight access. No one recognized me in the dim light, hunched over a CNC mill salvaged from a university discard pile. With each pass of the router bit, I carved perfectly angled channels into reinforced polymer plates. I machined custom quick-release clamps that folded into the tubing frame with the precision of a Swiss watch. When the space closed for the night, I'd pack up the pieces in weatherproof duffel bags and stash them in the Civic's trunk. By dawn, I was back at the motel room, laying out components on the cracked tile floor, labeling each one with colored tape and a small Sharpie. Meanwhile, my family's assumptions worked in my favor. After the garage debacle, they believed me defeated, probably bottled up in some dead-end freelance job, too beaten to pursue anything meaningful. My brother's Instagram stories flaunted yacht parties and influencer meetups. My parents posted concerned updates about hoping for closure. And neither had any idea I was orchestrating the rise of a venture that would make their shallow gossip look small. That secrecy was my shield. If they thought I was broken, they'd let their guard down. No interference, no belittling comments, no fake sympathy. Within weeks, I had a functioning prototype, 3 feet tall when assembled, 2 feet wide, and collapsed down to a 19-inch cube. It housed a micro 3D printer, a mini lathe attachment, a small power generator, and a docking station for laptops and tablets. I invented a novel hinge mechanism that used spring-loaded steel detents instead of clumsy wingnuts. One flick of the wrist, and the whole assembly snapped into operational mode. I filmed a short demo video on my phone, showing the system folding itself out and powering up under its own solar panel. The video was raw and shaky, but genuine. I uploaded it anonymously to niche maker groups and a handful of specialized subreddits. Within days, it had thousands of upvotes and hundreds of comments praising the ingenuity. Inquiries poured in from tech bloggers and field technicians alike. My next move was audacious. I quietly pitched a small run of pre-orders, just 50 units, to a boutique Amazon FBA service under a pen name. I crafted a minimalist product page with carefully curated photos and bullet points highlighting portability, durability, and rapid deployment. I priced it at a premium but offered a discount for the first 10 customers. Before I even activated the listing, I had a waiting list 10 times larger than my initial goal. They were willing to put down non-refundable deposits to secure the first batch. My heart pounded as the orders trickled in, a living testament that I didn't need their garage, their approval, or their hollow speeches. I only needed my hands, my head, and the capacity to see opportunity where no one else dared to look. By the time my first small shipment rolled off the line, I was ready to scale. I had a warehouse space lined up through a contact I'd made at the makerspace, an LLC registered under Moduform Labs, and a network of beta testers raving about the foldable fabrication station. My family's voices had long since faded into noise, distant echoes of doubt drowned out by the hum of my machines and the steady drip of orders that would soon outstrip their wildest expectations. I was ascending, silent and unstoppable, building something far greater than a garage could ever contain. I was in the back corner of a buzzing industrial expo hall when it happened. The roar of chatter and clanking booths felt distant as I stood next to my modular fabrication station, now branded with the sleek Moduform Labs logo. Under bright LED spotlights, my foldable workshop stood fully deployed on its pedestal. Solar panels fanned out like wings, the mini lathe spinning silently, the micro 3D printer nozzle melting filament with surgical precision. Attendees streamed past, some pausing mid-step, jaws dropping at the uncanny portability. A reporter from Tech Innovator magazine wandered over, eyes wide as she snapped photos and peppered me with questions I'd rehearsed but never believed I'd answer under real lights. "Where did you come up with this?" she asked. I gave her the distilled elevator pitch: remote makers, disaster response teams, field engineers. She nodded, scribbling furiously. "We want to feature you in our annual Top 10 Breakthroughs issue." Less than 24 hours later, my inbox exploded. Notifications pinged on my phone in an unstoppable torrent, pre-orders tripled, conference invitations flooded in, and a handful of venture firms requested meetings. By midnight, Tech Innovator had published a glowing 2-page spread. From motel room to maker's dream, How Madhuform Labs is redefining on-site manufacturing. The article went viral on social media, retweeted by influencers, shared in subreddits and LinkedIn threads. I watched the counters climb while I sat on the motel room's sagging bed, the soft glow of the laptop illuminating my face. I read the headline aloud. Man rebuilds workshop beyond family's grasp, launches portable fabrication revolution. A hollow laugh escaped me as I pictured my parents scrolling past that very article, my brother's smug selfies replaced by my face plastered across the internet. By morning, local news stations had picked up the story. A camera crew showed up at the rundown motel under the pretense of human interest. I let them film the cramped room, boxes of aluminum tubing stacked like tombstones, the desk piled with electronics modules, the faded wallpaper curling at the edges. They captured my rundown Honda Civic parked outside, the handwritten Poe box label on the door. The contrast was stark, a shabby backdrop for a breakthrough that promised to upend manufacturing. The news anchor ran the segment. What began as a family tragedy has turned into a tech triumph. Today, Madhuform Labs announced a seed funding round of $1 million led by Silicon Valley investors. I stared at the screen as tears welled up. I dreamed of this moment but never pictured it in a Fleabag motel or behind a pseudonym. The irony didn't escape me. My family had called my workshop worthless junk, but here it was, the centerpiece of a story that spanned from local cable news to international tech sites. Comments scrolled by, "This is poetic justice. Don't mess with the underdog. Build your dreams on skill, not sentiment." I smiled through the tears, a knot of vindication and relief unwinding in my chest. I booked a flight out that afternoon to meet with the lead investor in Palo Alto. At the tarmac, I paused to call my parents just once to deliver the news in my own voice. My mother answered, her tone brittle with forced cheer. "Sweetheart, are you okay? We've been worried sick." I swallowed, feeling the old anger flicker heat through my veins. "I'm more than okay," I said calmly. "I'm about to close a seven-figure funding deal for Madhuform Labs." The silence on their end stretched. Finally, my father stammered, That's excellent, son." I let them stew in the unmarked pause, then added, "You sold my workshop. You stole my future. Now you'll see it under a name you barely knew existed." I hung up before they could reply. 2 days later, the headlines reached my hometown. My parents scrolled through feeds filled with articles proclaiming me the Phoenix Maker. My brother's latest Instagram post lingering unresolved, no yachts, no applause, just a stalled business plan. Neighbors texted them links. "Did you see your son on Tech Innovator?" My father's face must have drained of color. Their silence was louder than any apology. Meanwhile, I stood on a stage at a packed tech conference, accepting the Innovation in Manufacturing Award. The applause thundered like artillery, the spotlights hotter than any welding torch I'd used. I spoke about loss and betrayal, about turning ashes into the steel frame of a new dream. And in that moment, I realized I'd done more than rebuild a workshop. I'd smashed the illusions that nearly broke me. My family could no longer dismiss me, could no longer gaslight me into failure. The world had seen my work, and it was glorious. As I stepped off the stage, journalists swarmed, capture mics thrust under my chin. I held my head high, chest pounding with pride. The revelation was complete. The dream they tried to kill had become something transcendent, untouchable, unstoppable, and undeniably mine. They called it a hiccup, but when the lawsuit papers arrived 3 weeks after my big reveal, it was a roaring avalanche. My brother's supplier, the same one my parents paid off by selling my workshop, filed for breach of contract and fraud. The invoice, stamped and notarized, demanded 10 times the original sum plus punitive damages. The brief they'd filed in court made their patchwork bailout look like a slap in the face. No documented settlement, no lawyer's oversight, just my parents' desperate wire transfer. Now the supplier was suing the entire family, naming them as guarantors on my brother's shaky agreement. Word spread fast. One morning, my father's phone buzzed no less than 50 times with robocalls from debt collectors and legal clerks. My mother spent hours pacing our old living room, tapping her fingers against the window frame the way she used to tap her fork at dinner when she was annoyed. I watched from across the street, my first free afternoon in months, seeing them for the first time truly terrified. Their faces, gaunt with sleepless nights, bore the realization that they'd cut the heart out of their own son for a dead-end rescue mission. My brother, he vanished into his friend's downtown loft, plastic-faced with shame. His Instagram stories went silent, no more yachting selfies or hyped-up meetups. Instead, he sent me a text pleading for help, a broken, desperate plea. But I was no longer the charity case they'd assumed. I forwarded his message to the court clerk as evidence of his incompetence and hung up. Inside the walls of that empty garage they once prided themselves on selling, the echo of my absence was deafening. My father attempted to salvage what remained of the space, ordering an estimate to turn it back into a storage shed. "We'll make do," he told my mother, voice hollow, but no contractor would touch it. Without the power tools and computer station I'd built, the place felt cursed, worthless rubble. He realized too late that the value wasn't in the raw materials or the space, but in the expertise and the planning that no amount of money could replace. My mother broke down one evening, tears streaming as she scrolled through old photos of my workshop in its prime, the gleaming workbench, the pegboard alive with tools, my face smeared with sawdust, eyes bright with purpose. "We thought we were saving him," she whispered into the sofa cushions. "We thought we were saving everyone." But saving her golden son had only deepened the debt, leaving her hollow and guilty. Meanwhile, the court hearing loomed. The supplier was demanding full payment plus interest, and any attempt at renegotiation was met with contempt. They discovered the patchwork nature of the wiring, how my parents had funneled funds through multiple accounts to hide the origin. Now an auditor had them in his crosshairs, claiming they'd committed fraud themselves. Serious fraud. The family's savings, once thought secure behind investments in my brother's fleeting ventures, were frozen. Their bank accounts locked, homes at risk of liens. Word of their financial meltdown reached me by text from a distant cousin. "They're in trouble, big trouble." I forwarded the message to my brother. He gasped when he saw it. "You could help, right? You have money now." He didn't even hide his assumption. I deleted his number, no guilt, no hesitation. In the past, I might have felt bad. Now I felt nothing but clarity, justice finally catching up. I heard my father's final admission a few days later when the solicitor knocked on my parents' door to serve foreclosure notices. Through the thin walls, I could hear him whisper, "If only we hadn't messed with his workshop." My mother answered with a flat, "I know," and it echoed through the neighborhood like a confession. Their social circle recoiled. Neighbors who once admired the successful family now avoided their eyes at the mailboxes. My brother's friends stopped returning his calls. No one wanted to be associated with the scandal. The veneer of invincibility they'd worn dissolved overnight. Meanwhile, I was on the front pages of every tech blog, signing contracts and expanding my team. It wasn't cruelty that drove me, it was the inevitable reckoning. The supplier's lawsuit was the spark that ignited the tinder they'd stacked with their own hands. By the time they realized the true value of what they'd thrown away, the foundation of my future, their own foundations were crumbling. And there was nothing they could do to reclaim the workshop that lived in my mind, now reborn far beyond the four walls they sold for a quick fix. The echo of their betrayal had returned to devour them whole, and I watched from the sidelines, phoenix risen, unstoppable. They showed up on my doorstep just as the late afternoon sun was dipping below the skyline. My mother's face pallid with desperation, my father's shoulders slumped like a man carrying stones. My brother lingered behind them, shifting from foot to foot, eyes darting from the Civic to my new home's clean lines, the company name etched on the mailbox, Moduform Labs. Their arrival was unannounced, but I'd anticipated this moment. I'd rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd stand, and where I'd draw the line. They stood on the concrete path leading to my front door, a chorus of broken apologies on their lips. "We need your help," my mother began, voice trembling. "We don't know what to do. If you could just—" She swallowed hard, looking past me at the foyer behind where I kept my prototypes. My father cut in, voice etched with fear. "We're losing everything. They're coming for the house, the bank accounts are frozen, and we're our only hope." My brother nodded, too ashamed to speak. I studied them in silence, palms open at my sides as if weighing their words. When they finished, the air was thick with regret and expectation. I took a slow breath, the cool evening breeze brushing my face. "You sold my workshop," I said evenly. "You sold it to fix his mistake, thinking it was cheaper than hiring a lawyer. You thought it was junk, collateral damage, like it was nothing." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My calm accentuated the gravity of their plea. "Now you've dug a deeper hole and you expect me to climb in and bail you out." My mother's eyes flickered with anguish. "Please understand," she whispered. "We made a mistake, we see it now. We underestimated what you did in that garage." I let the words hang in the air, underestimated, as though I'd been some amateur tinkering in the dark. "I grew something from nothing," I said. "I turned a motel room into an international venture. I raised $1 million in funding, I've got distributors lined up, and I've shipped units to 5 continents. Do you know what asset you destroyed? Not metal and wood, but the trust, the integrity, the future I built." My father stepped forward, voice pleading. "Son, we were stupid, we were desperate, but you have the expertise, the connections, you could negotiate with the supplier, you could help us restructure the debt." I cut him off, my expression impassive. "You gambled my future to patch his. You gambled my skills on his failure. You don't get to borrow them now that his failure has come home to roost." My brother's shoulders slumped further. He mumbled, "If you help them, maybe they'll forgive us." I looked at him and felt no pity. His recklessness had been the catalyst, his comfort in their indulgence had been the shield. I said, "I don't need forgiveness and I won't give you a life raft. You sold your bridge and now there's an ocean between us. My mother's bottom lip trembled. We're your family, she sobbed. We raised you, we supported you, I shook my head. You supported whoever made the flashiest promise. You cheered the quick wins and discounted the slow climb. You never gave me a chance to prove myself except through selling me out. They stood there, the three of them hollow-eyed and broken. I let them absorb that truth. Then I turned away and stepped inside, shutting the door in their stunned silence. Behind me, I locked the deadbolt. I heard my father pound lightly on the wood. I heard my mother call out, please just hear us. But I climbed the stairs to my study, to the wall lined with framed emails from investors, to the awards I'd earned. The faint hum of my prototype charging in the corner felt like a heartbeat, steady and alive. Everything they'd tried to bury. I didn't gloat, I didn't cackle. I simply stood there, hands in my pockets, letting their footsteps fade on the pavement. Outside, the yard lamp flickered, illuminating the company sign. Moduform Labs, a symbol of what they'd dismissed. A testament to what I'd achieved without their help. I owed them nothing. I would watch as they navigated the legal quagmire of their own making, just as I watched them dismantle my dreams. Their calls and messages would go unanswered. Their guilt and panic would echo through their empty bank accounts and unsaleable assets. And I would continue building, fueled by the knowledge that I refused to be collateral damage ever again. I belonged to myself now, and my riches were measured not in dollars, but in the unbreakable truth that I had risen, alone, relentless, and irrevocably free.